ago, announced some updates around 9 p.m. Eastern time. So we'll kind of see how that all goes. Uh, Lots going on in the news, and they just struck down a vote to restrict Trump's war powers. We'll talk about that a little bit. Sorry if I seem a little discombobulated. YouTube wasn't working right. So, but anyways, I have a great guest with me today. I'm very, very excited. It's his third time on the show, and I've done his show a bunch of times, and just always good to talk with him and link up with him. Very knowledgeable guy, particularly on Venezuela as well. I've listened to a bunch of his interviews where he talked about Venezuela, so I'm really excited to get into that today. But of course, before we get into that, please make sure you go to all the links below where you can find my guest, everything he's got going on. Of course, all my links where you can find out about everything I've got going on. No Substack today. I try to get one out once a week, but I was on vacation with the family, so I just didn't get the time to write recently. And of course, go to TigerFitness.com through the link below. Use code Kyle at checkout to let them know the Matovic family sent you. And with all that, let's rock and roll into the rest of the show. All right, everybody, and welcome back to the show, my dear friend Jose Nino. How you doing, brother?
I am doing quite well, and that's pretty neat that you're on Substack now because that's where the movement's going.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I'm just doing heavy metal stuff on Substack
Yeah.
because I noticed that's where like a little bit of a niche was missing. So I'm like, all right, man, I'll just do
Yes,
lighthearted
it's
stuff over there. But
there's a lot of
like,
high culture there. There's a lot of
ye-
cultural movement, not just like political commentary.
yeah, I've noticed, and it honestly surprised me how little activity there is on there. Not like there's nothing going on, but like how it's not more mass adopted because it seems like not only for content creators, but also just people in general. Like there's so much to do between video platforming, podcasting, writing articles. Like it feels like an old style blog, but turned like 2020s, and like it actually works.
Yes.
Like the app isn't broken, it's easy to read. You can pick up right where you left off. Like there's so much good about it, and it just doesn't seem like it's gained mass adoption, which is surprising to me.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. You see some elements of AI slop and other stuff
Yeah.
come algorithmic slop get put out there, but it's quite solid in terms of like the discussions for politics because there's generally a higher level of discussion. The adoption in the political side of things is, I think it's about right because when it gets too big, you
Mhm.
get just really bad commentary, a lot of bots, and just
Right.
a lot of noise. But it should, in my opinion, it should be bigger. And I agree with you at the blog thing. There is a kind of retro futuristic element to it
Right.
because the blogging has been largely on the downtrend for the last decade or so.
Mhm.
And it's good that it's given those type of people like an outlet where they can actually make money because if you're like a writer, most writers can't do YouTube, and the YouTube game has changed so much since
Yeah.
2017, in my view. So it's a different animal, but it's good that Substack now is somewhat of a fallback option for those people.
Right. Well, not only that, but like YouTube algorithm, I don't understand it. I've I've tried. I've
No,
had some videos that do really well, some videos that don't do well at all. I've had big guests on and it'll get next to no traffic. It just seems like you can't really grow organically on YouTube. Like it's kind of like the old saying, you have to have money to make money. You kind of have to have
yes,
subscribers and like a
story of
following.
the economy of the
Yeah.
U.S. economy in
W
general.
Yeah. Oh my god, dude, it's so bad. So I guess that kind of gets us into some of what I wanted to talk to you today about, which we'll get into some of the foreign policy stuff a little bit later. But you said a term in one of our group chats that had really stuck with me: Trumpian headcanon. And ever since then, when I see people kind of still on the plan trusting train, I always think about that. I'm like, man, the mental gymnastics these people have to participate in
There's a
just
lot
blows
less
my mind.
now.
Yeah, it blows my mind every time. There's still people hanging on, man, and there's still
Mhm.
people that are certain we're going down the right path. And I feel like right now, particularly, we're in like that whole phase right before the Iran war, where everyone's like, "Oh, look, Israel handled Iran by themselves, and we don't have to intervene." I feel like we're dealing with that, except for people saying the AI bubble isn't a thing, and also we're not going to war with Venezuela. So I know that's a lot, but I guess let's kind of start with like the AI bubble because I think you and I were talking a little bit about that before the show.
I'm not as in tune with the specific numbers and everything, but
Sure.
the US economy, it's so detached from rational economics like the stock market that something's gotta give. And what we're seeing in the generation of AI is a major concentration of wealth that honestly, it does resemble a lot of pre-revolutionary epochs, and
Mhm.
it is a big social question. And to be sure, AI is here to stay, but I get the vibe of the previous tech bubble of the late 90s, early aughts that just saw like a massive misallocation of resources towards all these dead end projects and just this irrational exuberance, if you will, with certain sectors that do provide value, but they're not as revolutionary as some of the hype men in the industry market them out to be.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think you see a lot of this with the whole crypto czar and like the crypto bros kind of becoming part of the Trump coalition, if you will, like the David Sachs, Mark Andreessen, who I know kind of hopped off last minute, your Vivek Ramaswamy, the whole PayPal mafia is really into this AI stuff. And I know I've heard some numbers where it was like 50% of GDP right now in the US is due to AI. I don't know if that's exactly correct, but I just remember seeing a lot of numbers saying that like the amount of GDP that's being focused in AI just is like absolutely ridiculous. And if you pulled that out, a lot of the economy really isn't doing well. And we were kind of talking a little bit in the pre-show about how like affording a house now just like isn't a thing. I threw up a status and a post on Twitter, both on Facebook and Twitter, talking about like the affordability of healthcare, which, you know, my daughter is about 4.5 months old right now. I'm 31 and my wife is 29. For us to have healthcare through my work is $711 a month, right? And there were people arguing with me saying, like, oh, you don't pay anything. I pay like $2,000 a month for healthcare. I'm like, that's fucking nuts. Like, nobody should be paying that much for healthcare. So, but we're told that we're springing back into the golden age. But I don't know, man. Like, people 10 years younger than you and I, they might not ever own a house because how the fuck are you gonna afford it? You're not gonna have 50 grand to put down by the time you're 20 years old. And then on top of that, even if you have 50 grand to put down, are you gonna be able to afford I think the average mortgage payment in the US is like $2,200. I I couldn't fucking afford $2,200 a month mortgage and all the bills and a car payment and student loans. But we're told that we're getting like $20 trillion in investments, which just sounds like bullshit to me. So
Yes, that's the broader issue with the economy is it's overly financialized, and then you have issues of mass migration, which add
yes.
further fuel to the fire, both legal and illegal. And that's
Right.
also tied into financialization because the economy is so reliant on foreign labor, whether it's
Mhm.
unskilled or skilled, that if you were to just like implement a full blown moratorium, which I support and all that, and just
Mhm.
wholesale restrictions, it will cause a good deal of businesses to like go under or have to radically restructure, but that has to happen because they're just living in a fictitious economic world where very little value is being created. And if anything, the type of gains being made are parasitic at best and they're concentrated in some of the worst economic actors. And it does not benefit the average American whatsoever because it
Mhm.
just ends up pricing out many white working class people or people that are aspire to be like the upper middle class.
Mhm.
And it's all going to these oligarchs and this new class of migrants or second generation, third generation migrants. And that's the story of our epoch now. And I think that if this question is not solved, it will lead to major upheaval. And I see this right now as just one of like the initial stages because I think things will gradually unravel in due course.
Yeah, I agree. Well, this kind of also gets us into our next topic that I really wanted to talk about was the whole Venezuela situation. I feel like we're going to spend a decent bit of time on this, and we'll get to Ukraine a little bit later because I feel like there's also a little bit going on there, and I want your perspective on that. Um, a lot of people in our space will argue, and I think pretty damn well rightfully, that immigration is the only issue that matters. So I don't entirely agree with that, but I do think it's one of the most important issues. But for some reason, we have to go to war with Venezuela and blow up all these quote unquote drug boats because a literal second generation migrant to the US is in charge of the State Department right now, whose brother used to, or his brother, yeah, his brother in law used to traffic cocaine, and we have to go fight a war with Venezuela because a whole bunch of migrants that live down in Florida voted him in, and he's making good on his promise to regime change all of Latin America. And of course, the man I'm talking about is the guy I focus on quite a bit in the show and on Twitter is Marco Rubio, who, like I said, he came here when he was 7 years old. I'm pretty sure his dad also, both his dad and his brother-in-law were both in the cocaine trafficking business, and now they're committed to regime change in Venezuela, and we're all told that this is going to bring about the golden age. This is just about drugs, even though virtually no fentanyl comes from Venezuela. Maybe a little bit of
Yeah,
cocaine, but yeah, go ahead.
this whole Venezuela chapter, which may be addressed in like 20 or odd minutes, thanks to Trump's statement, and who knows what he'll say
Yeah.
about this, is just such an insult to our intelligence. First off, as you mentioned, the drug trafficking is so minimal. Even the USSDA report just says that
Mhm.
Venezuela is like a non-existent player when it comes to fentanyl, and most of the cocaine that goes through Venezuela is generally ending up in Europe, if anything. But
Mhm.
it's not a big player in the drug market. If you're looking at big players in the drug market, whether it's like production or like transit states, Colombia, obviously,
Mhm.
central, like some of the northern triangle countries like Guatemala, Mexico, obviously, as well.
Mhm.
But those countries are not being targeted. And a lot of reasons for that is simple, that they're generally on much better terms with the US. And
Right.
case of Mexico, you have a Jewish president, which provides a get out of jail free card for it because they don't touch that. The US treats the Jews as a privileged class. And Guatemala historically has been one of like the most like slavishly pro-US states and one of those pro-Zionists to boot. So it gets
Mhm.
protected because of that. But Venezuela, on the other hand, they've earned its spot in the rogues gallery for the simple fact that it's very much aligned with China and Russia in terms of
Mhm.
economics and defense, especially with Russia. And then it's also quite aligned with Iran, and it's totally broken ties with Israel on diplomatic and like just all like economic and political fronts. So it has earned itself many enemies. The drug thing is just like a pretext to justify a type of regime change venture or some type of economic terrorism, because these sanctions and then the recent blockades and these boat attacks, they're all designed to cause terror, destabilization, and
Mhm.
ultimately intimidation that will lead to some type of breakdown of the Venezuelan system. That's the goal there. There's nothing national security focused about it because Venezuela does not constitute a national security threat to the United States, contrary to what some people say.
Yeah, one of the claims that some of my boomer friends, which I love them dearly, don't get me wrong, but that Maduro tampered with the 2020 election, and to me, it just seems so ridiculous on its face because, like, okay, so let's even say he did. Biden kept all the same sanctions on. Like, he wasn't as, rabidly hawkish on Venezuela as his current administration is, but like, it's not like he let up pressure. And you still had a lot of like the same actors saying, like, we still want regime change. So it's not like anything really changed. So what would exactly be the motivation? I mean, they had a failed coup with Juan Guaido in 2020 with Operation Gideon. So like, what purpose would that serve? And these are the same people who would all they cite 2000 Mules, which was done by a fucking Pajit scammer that admitted that all his claims were bullshit. So I like what the goal here is to try and get rid of Maduro, but like how are you going to do that without a coup or putting troops on the ground? Like, you could try to drone strike them, but
Yeah,
Scott Horton always
that's what
brings
I
up,
think.
yeah. No, you think
That's
it's
what I
going to happen?
think.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm just rambling. Yeah.
No, but continue about the Scott Horton. What did he say?
Okay, yeah, well, you were on Scott Horton's show, and it might not have been your opinions with him, but I know he was talking to somebody about this recently, where in 2020, or it might have been at Maduro's most recent election, where he said there must have been 500,000 to 1,000,000 people out in the streets, in support of Maduro. And I think this is pretty obvious to just about anybody with a operating brain, is that, like, if you attack a country's leader, even if the people generally don't like them, they're like, "No, fuck you. You're not coming into our country and overthrowing our leader." Like, we are a sovereign country, and foreign actors need to respect that. Unless you're the US and it's Israel trying to interfere in your elections, then you endorse it. But most countries are going to be like, we're not allowing foreigners to dictate our elections. And that seemed to be the same case with Maduro back then. Do you think that's still going to be the case for Maduro now?
All right, so much to unpack here, but
Yeah, good.
I haven't really investigated that whole fantastical claim
Mhm.
about Maduro interfering in the 2020 elections, because it's just wacky and some of the people promoting it are not very credible. I think this is a way of manufacturing consent
Yes.
for punitive action against Venezuela to a certain
Mhm.
crackpot constituency of the US electorate. Because if you look at how the US regime tries to whip up support for its ventures abroad, it
Mhm.
has segmented and targeted messaging to say, like, liberals,
Yes.
neoconservatives, conspiracy people, white
Mhm.
nationalists, whatever group you name.
Yes.
They have a specifically tailored message that's compartmentalized, and I think that's done for that type of kook crowd there. But no, I don't take that stuff seriously. It's just another way to try to get people to hate on Venezuela.
Right.
And yes, I don't think so. There is a big theme of US foreign policy since Obama that there has been a clear aversion to using direct troops, US troops on the ground,
Mhm.
especially when there's the potential for a mass casualty event, because the American public just doesn't have that urge for war right now.
Mhm.
However, because of that, US has started really doubling down with the use of special forces, black ops, and covert operations,
Mhm.
and drone strikes too.
Yes. Especially drone
Drones,
strikes.
yes. And this is also a very Israeli type of thing as well. It's almost US foreign policy has become very Judaized, if you will, because of the fact that,
Yeah.
like the Israelis, the US is obsessed with decapitation strikes
Mm.
and these type of covert actions. Seth Harp, in his book The Fort Bragg Cartel, which is absolutely excellent, I recommend all people buy it or at least get the audiobook. It details how the US has transitioned more to the use of special forces and other of these other elements to carry out gross examples of assassinations, extrajudicial killings, sabotage operations, and other hidden hand methods to destabilize the US's enemies abroad. And that's what I think is going to happen with Venezuela, is that they're going to probably try to do economic warfare, blockades. That's like the hardest power. And then these strikes against so-called narco terrorists, and even probably escalate to the use of decapitation strikes against the Venezuelan regime or generals in it. Any figures like for example, you saw that with Iran with the Soleimani strikes in 2020. I
Mhm.
think they're going to try to implement that model with Venezuela, regardless of what happens tonight or this week. I think that's going to be a long-term strategy. And this is what I tell people in the 21st century, as the US starts declining more, it's going to be reliant on a lot more proxy forces, mercenaries, and other hidden
Mm.
hand operation stuff, because the US's military industrial base, there's a big crisis there that people aren't talking
Mhm.
about. If you read a lot of military journals, there's just a dawning realization that the US cannot really do conventional wars because it strains a lot of the military supplies and stockpiles. Like Ukraine, for example, has affected US's ability to provide interceptors, missile interceptors, and stuff to like Israel. And that's one of the underrated factors why Israel backed out of further escalations during the 12-day war against Iran because
Mhm.
its interceptor stockpiles are being depleted because the US is now facing the very real prospect of imperial overstretch where its resources for boosting its allies, whether it's Ukraine or Taiwan, they're very finite, and it's near peer or peer competitors like Russia, China, and even Iran are actually starting to make impressive innovations. And as a result of that, that's why I think Trump is trying to reindustrialize, but it's not because of an America first thing. It's just try to like keep up with these military powers and try to retrench. And in the meantime, they're probably going to rely more on black ops. I think, for example, next year is going to be very interesting because there's going to be elections in Brazil and Colombia. And if they get a rightoid president in either or, especially in Colombia, they're probably going to activate some of these right wing paramilitaries there to serve as some type of shock troops or black
Mm,
ops types to cause trouble in Venezuela. Because
mhm.
Venezuela's border of Colombia is quite porous, and also the cultures are not that shocking. So there's not much of a culture shock between the two countries
Sure.
outside of the accents, and they can just embed these people in Venezuela and cause mayhem there and possibly take out high value targets like in the Venezuelan military. And that's what I try to tell people, that like there might not be a war per se, but there will be destabilization in some shape or form.
Yeah, and that kinda seemed to be the Trump strategy all throughout his first term,
You continue
because
Obama basically.
yeah, because like, you think about the whole Uyghur genocide thing, and then that even goes beyond just that narrative. It also goes back to, and I think it was February of 2019 when Trump had issued, the CIA to launch a propaganda war against China, and obviously that was part of that. And I can't help but ever, like, disconnect that from also, like, the whole COVID narrative because, kinda like how you said, there's targeted messaging. A lot of obviously, like, a lot of the Trump administration wants to do this whole pivot to China. Now, I also want to talk to you about like the national security strategy, which is going to be adopted for the national defense strategy. I don't know exactly when they plan on doing that, but Elbridge Colby being one of the key players in this whole foreign policy administration, who's actually more of a dove on Iran, but more of a hawk on China. It's interesting because they seem to want to pivot over to Latin America, but I
Yes.
think what you were kind of making about them trying to hand these wars off to different proxies, I've made that same point and observation because it seems to be true, but it just doesn't seem like they're gonna be able to do it because, like, we're still directly involved in the Middle East. Just 3 troops got killed, what was it, 2 days ago in Syria. They're building all these bases. I know they're building one in Syria. They wanna build one in Gaza. There was another country in the Middle East that I think they wanted to, build one in. Trump was talking about occupying Bagram again. It doesn't seem like the US is gonna be able to pull out of a lot of these conflicts, and there's still
No, it's
plan
not.
posters
No.
saying that they're gonna pull out, that we're getting out of the Middle East even though we're still involved, and that, it seems like they wanted these decapitation strikes and pull out a lot of the conflicts, but, like, the if I'm being honest, the Trump administration is just completely too incompetent to figure out how to do any of this.
Yeah, it's too incompetent. And I would stress as well that the Latin America strategy, it's highlighted there, is basically an admission that Trump's trade war with China failed.
Yes.
And what they're doing now is, I don't think, for example, there's going to be much reshoring of industry to the United States. Instead, they're probably going to try to do nearshoring and
Right.
friendshoring in
Yes.
Latin America. And they're trying to, that's why they're trying to, that's why they're specifically in that document. They want to try to kick out Chinese economic investment and other activity from the rest of Latin America. They're going to pressure these countries, whether it's like Panama all the way down to Peru or Chile, to stop doing
Mhm.
business with China. Much easier said than done. And to try to effectively create an economic sphere of influence in the Western Hemisphere that not only subjugates these countries but also tries to create certain manufacturing bases. But I think it's going to be really difficult because the Chinese manufacturing model is not only cheaper, but it's also more effective. It's more efficient and very high skilled as well. There's so many, it's a perfect storm of a mass of labor and competence of labor that them trying to replicate that in Latin America will fail. They could probably do that with Mexico. Mexico is going to become much more economically integrated as it already is to the United States, but I just think it's going to be a lot harder. And the issue with the US, frankly, is that the ruling class in the US just sees the entire world as its sphere of influence, not just the Western Hemisphere.
Right.
So all this talk of it retrenching strikes me as jumping the gun and people engaging in wishful thinking. I still see the US maintaining its imperial footprint. It's just going to change up the tactics a bit where they're going to have, they're probably going to develop proxies, and you're going to probably see a boom in the mercenary game as well. I mean, look at it at domestic level in the US after the George Floyd riots. You see a lot more private security across the United States in major cities because policing has been gutted, or at least now it's no longer a attractive career opportunity for people. So rich people have just turned to private security. And at the geopolitical level, you could extrapolate that trend and see the same way, where the military's activities are going to be done through either covert operations with intelligence agencies or contractors now. That's increasingly the case. And that's good. That's the story of 21st century geopolitics now. And especially with the US, as it starts declining, it's going to be more reliant on that. But that's not a cure-all. That's going to create a whole different set of problems because mercenaries are not the most trustworthy type of soldiers for carrying out a state's grand strategy abroad.
Mhm. I guess when it comes to the whole pivot to Latin America, it kind of going back to your point about tailored messaging, it is surprising to me that like people really focus on the China Venezuela angle, which like don't get me wrong, there is an angle there, but um if I remember correctly, I know Russia has sent weapons and Wagner troops over to Venezuela, but
Yeah.
I believe Iran has as well, whereas China has really only maintained like a very good.
Economic.
Right. It's purely economic for China, but like Russia and Iran have both sent military stuff there. So, it's weird that no one ever brings that up. But once again, I think that's because it's easy to gin people up over China, but like Russia, like Trump has largely neutered the whole anti-Ukraine war thing because he now owns the Ukraine war. But as far as like the Iran stuff goes, everyone thinks that there's peace in Iran and peace in Gaza, but I think everybody with a brain knows that like that war's still completely unsettled. Like the root causes of that were not solved. Like that's going to bubble up again eventually. They may have kicked it down the road for maybe a year, but it's going to come back up again. So, um, I've seen some people joke about, oh, well, Venezuela, I can't wait for people to make this about Israel. I know you can actually make this case better than I can. So, why would Israel care about Venezuela?
Mostly because of the Iran connection and to a lesser extent Hezbollah, because Hugo Chavez's regime, Nicolas Maduro's predecessor, has been pretty anti-Zionist. They broke like
Mm,
all diplomatic and political ties in '06, '07. And Hugo Chavez was actually influenced by a guy named Norberto Ceresole, who was this Argentine intellectual that was very anti-Zionist and even to an extent an anti-Semite. And that influenced Hugo Chavez and the Venezuelan geopolitical vision of challenging both the US and Israel in diplomatic and propagandistic terms. And I've
mhm,
argued that in Venezuela, especially through its sponsorship of Telesur, has gotten many Latin American leftists to become much more anti-Zionist in the
mhm.
last 20 years or so. It's created a big constituency of that. And Israel and the United States understand the value of the information war, and they see that as a threat. Also, like the Hezbollah and Iran connection is also just basically a pragmatic alliance that Venezuela has formed in that, like Iran, it has faced increasing security competition with the United States
Mm.
and sanctions and other forms of tensions. And as a result of that, they get pushed together. And also, they get pushed together with China and Russia that face similar hostile acts from the United States. So they naturally align. And the Hezbollah connection is probably valuable for Venezuela because Hezbollah is a guerrilla slash liberation movement that specializes in asymmetric warfare, which could come in handy for Venezuela should it be involved in a conflict, in a kinetic conflict with the United States. That's where that connection lies. And also with Maria Corina Machado, the current opposition leader, she's figured out one thing that a lot of people in the United States largely ignored for the last few decades and up until October 7th, that world Jewry is like the only sovereign in U.S. politics. So she directly appealed to the Likud. That's actually quite unprecedented amongst the Venezuelan opposition because they generally never went directly to Netanyahu or like Israel for stuff. They may have said in passing, like Juan Guaido appreciated Netanyahu's endorsement in 2019, but he
Mhm.
never went out of his way to forge this unofficial pact with Maduro.
Mhm.
I meant to say with Netanyahu
Netanyahu?
or Likud.
Yeah.
But yeah, uh, yeah. But so basically, there is an angle here. It's not the sole angle. I try to point this out in one of my articles that world Jewry doesn't like Venezuela, essentially, and they view it as a country that's aligned with the enemies of Israel, especially Iran, which has had excellent relationships. And even Hugo Chavez was inspired by the Ayatollah Khomeini as well.
Mhm.
So there's always been that kind of latent animosity there. And let's face it, the US and Israel are attached at the hip on foreign policy. So the their Israeli and broader Jewish interests take precedence over other concerns on the geopolitical stage.
Right. Yeah. And I guess the other question that I have, I saw that Marina Corina Machado, who she was even like relevant in the Bush administration, like they were trying to push for her back then. Do I have that right?
Yes, it's actually kind of funny.
Yeah.
She got like only like 2% of the vote in the 2012 primaries there.
Uh,
And what's funny is she's a political go-getter. She was always involved in the NGO space.
mm,
And this go around, she just went straight to Likud, straight to the power center, and that's what really allowed her to take off, in my opinion,
mm,
because she was just some obscure dime a dozen NED NGO money recipient that you see
mm,
all over the world,
yeah.
whether it's Venezuela or all the way to like Georgia or any other former Soviet states. And yeah, she's always been like that. Her family's pretty well off in Venezuela. She's part of an old style oligarchic class that's very anti Chavismo. So she's a natural constituent of potential foreign influence operations by the United States and its allies.
Mm. What was the whole deal with her getting the Nobel Peace Prize? I saw that she got it. I don't know why, but I mean, like, it obviously Obama got it, which is just like, okay, like that's a fucking joke. But like, why would she get it? Because like like you said, she's basically she's a CIA puppet essentially. So what the hell even was the deal with that? Was it just because she sucked up the Likud, or I don't know?
I think it's a multitude of factors because the Venezuelan opposition is really connected to the liberal interventionist type of wing of
Mhm.
NATO US politics. And she has a lot of favor. She's dipped her toes. She's covered all her bases. She goes to the Cubans in Miami. She goes
Mhm.
to the Euro liberal interventionists in Oslo, and then she goes to Likud as well to garner support. And I think that's what's led to her becoming a lot more relevant now because she's not just
Mhm.
appealing exclusively to the United States.
Gotcha. So I guess we could pivot on over to Ukraine, unless there's anything else that you felt we missed on Venezuela.
I mean, you got that announcement, which could be happening at any second,
It's
but
actually going on right now. I actually have that pulled up if we want to watch that for maybe a few minutes and see if we get anything interesting. Would that be cool?
yeah, go ahead.
Cool. Let's
Laughed at from all over the world, but they're not laughing anymore. Over the past 11 months,
You did
we
that
have
all right?
brought more
Yeah.
positive change to
Cool.
Washington than any administration in American history. There's never been anything like it, and I think most would agree. I was
It's
elected
kind of
in
the
a
usual Trump.
landslide, winning the popular vote and all 7 swing states and everything else, with a mandate to take on a sick and corrupt system that really just took the wealth from people and crushed the dreams of the American people. For the last 4 years, the United States was ruled by politicians who fought only for insiders, illegal aliens, career criminals, corporate lobbyists, prisoners, terrorists, and above all, foreign nations, which took advantage of us at levels never seen before. They flooded
He's
your
actually
cities
right.
and towns with illegal aliens. They decimated your hard earned savings. They indoctrinated your children with hate for America. They just released a level of violent felons that we had never seen to prey on innocent. They caused war, they caused mayhem, they caused a horrible situation all over the globe. But now you have a president who fights for the law abiding, hardworking people of our country, the ones who make this nation run, who make this nation work. And after just 1 year, we have achieved more than anyone could have imagined. Starting on day one, I took immediate action to stop the invasion of our southern border. For the past 7 months, 0 illegal aliens have been allowed into our country, a feat which everyone said was absolutely impossible. Do you remember when Joe Biden said that he needed Congress to pass legislation to help close the border? He was always blaming Congress and
Biden
everyone else.
technically closed
As it
it.
turned out, we didn't need
Mm.
legislation. We just needed a new president. We inherited the
How
worst border anywhere
I know I don't know the exact specifics. I wonder if I could, and I can't quite increase the speed,
in
but
the world, and we quickly turned it into the strongest border in the history of our country.
I
In
feel
other
like he's
words,
bullshitting when
in
he
a few
says that there
short
have been
months,
0 border
we went from
crossings.
worst
There's
to best.
low, but that's been
Deporting
happening since the
criminals,
end
restoring safety to our most
of the
dangerous cities.
Biden
Just
administration
take a look at
because
Washington,
Biden
D.C.
cut a
It's at
cynical
levels
political
of
deal with
safe.
Mexico to get
Mhm.
them to step up border enforcement. He did it for political reasons because he's
Yeah.
getting hammered at the polls because of immigration. That's arguably next to inflation was why Biden lost. But like the
Right.
mass migration deluge there was what sunk Biden, but he he pulled a desperate measure towards the end of the summer to get Mexico to stop a lot of these border crossers from Central America, Haiti, and
Mhm.
other areas. But a lot of that, to be honest, is also just a broader regime ploy that I've argued is really a pivot away from illegal immigration to like a more
Mhm.
Canadian, Australian form of legal migration, which creates a whole new set of problems.
Right. Yeah, and that's kinda like the whole MAGA movements thing. Like, everyone's freaking out about Vivek Ramaswamy right now, but, like, it's kind of funny because people will never just come out and say, "Oh yeah, well actually Trump shares that same," like there's no daylight between Vivek and Trump on immigration. Like they
Yeah.
both view the American as like an idea, as not like an actual people and a heritage. They don't, neither Trump or Vivek think of Americans as people. They think of America as an idea.
Yeah, the thing about Vivek and say like Elon Musk as well is that they're just like
Mhm.
socially uncalibrated people that said that quiet part out loud
Right.
last December. Because like yeah, like a lot of people from South Asia, like no matter how assimilated they appear, they
Mhm.
they will blow up the spot and just say straight up like we want to like replace you with that whole prom queen comment. And that's why now there's like a lot more scrutiny on that, and I bet you Trump and company are pissed because now everybody's watching them like hawks. Because I was telling people from the start, look at the way Trump like runs his own businesses. He's using foreign labor in some shape or form, whether it's illegal or legal. And that's like
Mhm.
the story of the Republican Party in general. Easiest
Yeah.
form of opposition research you could do with a Republican candidate you hate, whether it's like the state, local, or even federal level. See if they have a small business and then see if they actually have illegals. You might find something there. And that's why like the Republican Party is just not a credible immigration restriction vehicle whatsoever. But yeah, I
Mhm.
do believe it's going to be moving towards a more legal route. You might see an amnesty, but I tend to think that they're going to try to make the legal system a lot easier, increase
Mhm.
that quota from like the 1 million or so that are left that are allowed to enter the country to
Mhm.
like say 5 million or so annually. That's the way Canada and other countries have done it. It's a disaster one way or the other.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, you look at Canada. Canada's not even recognizable anymore.
Oh
I
hell
got
no,
this.
no.
Yeah, it's all it's all Jeets essentially. I'm
That's why
re
Trump wants to annex it.
yeah. Imagine all the H-1Bs.
Yeah.
Geez. I got the. I'm watching with the subtitles the presentation on Facebook, and it's still just Trump fucking bloviating. So, I guess if we
Yeah.
see something, I'll let you know. I'll have it up on a tab on my other screen, but he's
Yeah,
just
let's
still
not
talking about
yeah.
how great he
Yeah.
is. I thought it was going to be something, something a little bit more meaningful because there were some people saying there was going to be announcement of war with Venezuela tonight, but there were also some people saying, "Oh no, this is all about how great the country's doing." But I don't know, man. I guess we could probably wrap on the Venezuela stuff about like what is their ultimate goal here. It seems like Trump wants regime change, but he's being lukewarm. Like he doesn't want to commit any troops. Drone strikes, or he might go for it, but that's still pretty risky because he's already tanking in the polls. So like it seems like he's just, he doesn't know if he wants to shit or get off the pot. What do you make of it?
The administration is schizophrenic and it just has so many competing factions, whether it's the Cuban
Mhm.
Gusano set with Rubio and then other people that are more restrained on the issue. A lot of it too is just the fact that the US needs to get on the win column, and the people running foreign policy view it like a sports game, and they just want to win somehow. They want to channel the 80s where the US was able to successfully intervene in
Mhm.
Grenada and Panama, but those situations were way different, as I demonstrated in one of my recent Substack posts. That those are much smaller countries, especially in the case of Panama. The US had like logistics installed there and a lot of assets on the ground because it was a de facto colony of the US. So it's pretty easy for the US troops to go in there and mop things up. But Venezuela's a lot bigger and the geography is not very good. And I think that's factored into the hesitancy because I can tell you this, in the 1990s, if they had a similar situation with Venezuela, they would have intervened much faster. I think there's a lot of debate going on in the inner Trump's inner circle and the defense establishment that, yeah, this is not going to be a walk in the park, and it could turn into a protracted conflict, which is something that the U.S. ruling class is very much averse to right now. But they'll still mess with Venezuela. Don't get me wrong. They do want to get a win, whether it's a regime change or just really bloodying Venezuela, because the foreign policy mindset now is just really nihilistic. And and for them, for the US, which is a bully, dishing out some type of damage, consequences be damned, is how it operates.
Right. So, yeah, that seems to be the case to me. Now, I remember you also saying, I think it was either when you were on with the Antelope Hill guys, or it might have been with Scott when you said, I think it was Antelope Hill radio channel, where you said that they may want to do something symbolic with these strikes on Venezuela, and if you don't see it by then, because it was supposed to be on a specific date in December, what's do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yes, I've mentioned that. You could see that
Mhm,
where the US attacks like some remote military facility and just pounds its chest
mhm,
about sticking it to Venezuela and just warning it. I mean, it's pretty dumb and silly stuff, but this administration has nothing but weird foreign policy fixations, and it doesn't operate in a very coherent manner. So I wouldn't put it past them doing that. I do think that they're going to do something with regards to kinetic action, and the boat stuff has generally been its go-to act, because let's face it, in the Western Hemisphere, no one's going to challenge the U.S. for now, and they could get
right,
away with it because it is like the undisputed hegemon of this area. And they might keep that up for a while, to be honest, because there's no real immediate blowback to it. There's no credible military force in the region to stand up to it
right,
when the U.S. blows up the boats. Though it will have long-term consequences, because it just makes the U.S. look more rogue, and I think it benefits China a lot, because will just be seen as a more reliable, peaceful partner that
mhm.
protects waterways, that invests abroad, and that has a more sustainable economic model. But the U.S. right now is just behaving like a little kid on the world stage, and people are seeing it every day.
Right. Yeah, and this is kind of like the whole thing with China. Like, I'm sure you've probably seen the memes. I know. I think you said you had a conversation with Carl Zaw, where he always says China's mo is basically do nothing, win.
Yes, exactly.
Like when it was funny, there was a Fuentes interview with some weird dude, and he was asking Fuentes what he thought of Xi and Putin, and he said to both of them wise when he asked Fuentes like one word to describe either one of those guys. And I think that's right, because
Yeah.
Xi and Putin, I think, both look at their countries and think of like a long-term legacy. Like China's whole thing is the 5-year plan, right? Like, hey, by 2025, we're going to do this. By 2030, we're going to do that. Russia, right now, they're very strategic in how they're fighting Ukraine. We don't have that in the US. Like you said, right now, the Trump administration is pretty schizophrenic about foreign policy. And this is kind of demonstrated in the trade war, which you mentioned a little bit earlier, is like they're all over the board. Like, are we going to have tariffs on China? Are we not? Are we, going to be ramping them up? Or are we going to be taking them down? Is it deal on? Is it deal off? Like, nobody knows. But China, really, through all of it's just kind of like, all right, whatever you guys want to do, we'll be right here. We'll answer your calls. But if you're going to push us around, we're not going to tolerate it. We will push back. And I think Trump came to the realization like we just can't fuck with China like we used to anymore.
Yes, 100%. This is
Mhm,
not the unipolar moment. It's not the 1950s either, when the US was actually economically unipolar.
mhm,
So, yes, I just think that the many people in the United States are forever stuck in the 1990s,
mhm,
where the US can just invade Iraq and be done with that conflict in a matter of weeks, where that dynamic no longer exists, because whatever country the US invades abroad is going to get support some way or the other from Russia, China, or other countries. Even Turkey. Turkey has been an unlikely ally of Venezuela since 2016 or so. So the globe is changing, and the American political class has not adapted, and also its model, the economic model the U.S. has, is not very good either. It's very financialized and deindustrialized, and it's also very corrosive. Just look at the AI bubble, and also the mass promotion of parasitic activity like sports gambling. This is a sign of a sick economy and society that,
Right.
frankly, like, it can barely get its house in order. And what makes people think that it's going to be able to project power abroad against serious competitors like China? I mean, no, the game has changed, and people have not adapted and updated their software.
Yeah, and it's amazing that people are still kind of hanging on here, and it's I don't know, man. I'm still watching this out of the right side of the screen here, and it's still just Trump bloviating about everything that's going
Yeah,
so
I
great.
think it's a big nothing burger, to be honest.
Yeah,
It's not even worth commenting on. A lot of this
yeah.
day-to-day stuff, frankly, is just noise, and the real discussions are being held at the think tanks, the reports,
Mhm,
and these panels that get maybe like 60 views on YouTube, but that still
mhm,
discuss like the real stuff that's happening that involves the real players that shape public policy in the US. So,
mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't think, if I'm being honest, I don't think they're gonna announce war with Venezuela tonight.
no,
Tucker
no.
Carlson said they would, but I was like, I don't know. I don't think Trump wants to take a L, and I think this does get us into Ukraine because, like, I think Trump had the opportunity when he first got elected, and you and I think we're ahead of the curve on this because there were a lot of people who, as you said, bought the Trumpian headcanon and said, "Oh, he's gonna end the war on day one." And I think you and I were both like, "No, I don't think it's gonna happen because personnel and then also past policy." So his first term, he was very hawkish on Russia. I did a whole podcast describing out all his policy from 2017 to 2019 on how he was throwing out Russian diplomats, all the sanctions on Russia, the Javelin anti-tank missiles to Ukraine, all that stuff. And then he was bragging about how he's going to send more weapons to Ukraine. And then all throughout the campaign, bragging about how he sent weapons to Ukraine. And then one of the key figures, Keith Kellogg at the America First Policy Institute, which I didn't catch that initially, but you turned me on to that. And I remember reading through like the whole policy paper on Ukraine, and they're talking about army Ukraine. I'm like, how do people believe that he's actually going to end this? If it was day one and he said, "Hey, this is Biden's war, we're letting you guys go and we're not being a part of it anymore," that was your chance. But now we're a year in and we're actually worse off. Like the US is now more involved in Ukraine than it was before. And these peace plans that they're putting out are just ridiculous. So I guess I'll throw it over to you. What do you make of like the first year? And then I want to talk about the 28-point peace plan. Maybe not point by point, but the overalls.
Well, here's the thing too with a lot of foreign policy analysts, they've really have fallen for the Trump mystique. And when you're talking about US foreign policy,
Mm,
it's not something that's determined really by presidents. It's determined by the think tank cabals,
mm,
the Jewish supremacist power configuration that runs DC, and other factions of foreign policy decision making, whether it's like the liberal interventionist and neoconservatives, Israel first crowd, blah, blah, blah. And regardless of who's in office, you're going to get hawkish policies in some shape or form. Trump's, as you mentioned, was quite hawkish against Russia in his first term, from the
mm.
delivery of lethal aid to Ukraine to the exit of several treaties with Russia.
That too, yeah.
Yeah, and the sanctions against Russia, and even the U.S. attacked Russian mercenaries in Syria. The guy was no dove, and one can make the case that his actions led to the Russo-Ukrainian war because he did nothing to de-escalate. He, if anything,
Mm,
he actually created for pressure on Joe Biden to actually up the ante,
mm.
because when you call out Trump on being a Russian agent, he'll just he'll just retort saying like nobody's been tougher on Russia than me. So
That's what
then
he always
that
said.
creates a yeah, that's what you always said. Yep. And that creates a dynamic where Democrats are like, oh crap, we're going to have to also escalate as well. And that's what you get, this escalatory spiral. Also, I would add too, October 7th was largely created because of diplomatic and Middle East initiatives that Trump took as well during his first term. I described it as a Judeo-accelerationist presidency because Trump broke a lot of taboos, whether it's the military aid to Ukraine or the movement, the move of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and the recognition of Israel's annexation of the Golan Heights and all of that, and the sidelining of the Palestinian issue. He created a lot of these conflagrations just set off fortuitously under Joe Biden's watch. But make no mistake about it, Trump is a creature of the foreign establishment in some shape or form. His family from his father has served Jewish Zionist interests. And with regards to the Ukraine thing, I just don't think that he is a peace candidate whatsoever. One of the reasons why, like you mentioned, the 28-point peace plan, why there's no peace in Ukraine is that the U.S. is not willing to take the L. It's actually quite simple, because the U.S. wants to like somehow give Russia a bloody nose. It wants to have its cake and eat it too. It wants to admit that, yeah, Project Ukraine has been a failure, but it doesn't want Russia to come out with a win. That's why the Trump administration continues to supply intelligence to Ukraine, because they want to avoid a fall of Saigon or a fall of Kabul moment, because Trump is obsessed with winning. He never wants to come out a loser. And that's why he will continue this thing, which will lead to the eventual destruction of Ukraine, to be honest. So might as well take the tough medicine now, take the L now, where you come out with an even worse situation further down the line.
Yeah, well, I know in private conversations, or at least so there have been reports where Trump said he knows Ukraine can't win, but then he'll throw out publicly like, "Oh, I think they'll be able to take back some territory." So if in private conversations you're saying that you know Ukraine can't win, but you're still continuing to provide them aid, intelligence, and weapons, then you're knowingly continuing to sacrifice generations of young Ukrainian men who are fighting. It's the Battle of Bakhmut back in, what was that, 2023 or 2024, where they said the average lifespan of a soldier was like 4 hours. And, forces were just getting decimated. And Joe Biden was still happy to send them aid, but then Trump gets in and we get this mineral deal, which seemed to be something that was supposed to be all great and help end Ukraine, but end the war, but like nothing really came of it. It just got us more involved. But like the sticking point, all these negotiations, Tucker, who I think is the greatest person in alternative media today, with some of the work that he's doing, some of the people he's platformed, the positions he's taken. It's amazing when he said that Steve Witkoff has like the hand of God on his shoulder, but they're always pushing for security guarantees for Ukraine. And like, how do you not know that's a non-starter for Russia? Like, how are they supposed to accept? Literally, they say Article 5 style security guarantees for Ukraine, which basically why put in the title Ukraine to join NATO. They're all but joining NATO in name, like that. They're literally getting everything that a NATO partner gets except for the title. And Russia, of course, would be right to reject this, because why would it be okay to have, Polish troops or American troops in Ukraine when that's what the special military operation began with? And and then also using frozen Russian assets to rebuild Ukraine. Like, all these are non-starters, and they're surprised that Russia isn't taking it.
Well, here's the thing: when you got people like Witkoff and Jared Kushner in the mix, these are people that, frankly, because of their Jewish extraction, they have no love lost for Ukrainians and Russians. A lot of these people come with ethnic grudges in some shape or form. And for them, like, if these negotiations fail, like, the consolation prize is that they get to see two Slavic people they freaking hate just continue to kill each other. That's also, you see that with people like Victoria Nuland and Anthony Blinken. They're a bit more sophisticated, but also a lot of people, whether it's Victoria Nuland or Jared Kushner, people literally see the Judeo-American empire, like Judeo-American primacy, has to be maintained at all costs, and that's why they have that type of tunnel vision. They can't admit that there's no way you can turn around the situation in Ukraine. But because of this myopic view, they will continue that this bloodletting ritual in Ukraine. And unfortunately, this is why I tell people that don't engage in wishful thinking with regards to your political analysis, because there's no faction that's even Buchananite in the Trump administration or the Republican Party or any of the parties in general. So it's just going to continue that way because people are possessed by the unipolar moment and wanting the U.S. to always remain on top.
Yeah, well, much to that point, I just don't think that's realistic. And like, I don't know if you listened to Tucker on Judge Nap today, which actually was an overall good show. Like, I've grown to like Tucker quite a bit, but they're constantly talking about trying to get Russia to turn against China, and it's like, well, that's gone.
Wishful
Like,
thinking. I have an
exactly.
article on that
Yeah,
at Libertarian Institute. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's like you said, it's wishful thinking because that moment's already come and gone. Like Russia and China are now good. Like they had that whole parade, which I thought was actually kind of funny. You had Kim Jong Un, Putin, and Xi all walking next to one another with all these like military banners and everything. It's like, all right, well, we blew our load on terror wars, and now China. It's like people our age in their 30s, like the vast majority of them in China own their home. And here in America, people are like in crippling student debt and can't afford cars, can't afford houses. And over in China, people are like living like they're now on their ascent where the US is on its decline. So, like, why would we expect Russia to be like, you know what, we're going to go side with the US again? Like, yeah, we have the global currency, but like, their leaders look in terms of decades. They don't look at it in terms of their presidential term. So unfortunately, I think the multipolar world is coming. If not, it's already here.
Yeah, it's just the reality of the situation. Like unipolarity is actually an historical aberration. There's really no such thing as a unipolar power, and that was just like a consequence of circumstances with the dissolution of the Soviet Union. But the Russia-China split they're trying to manufacture, I mean, good luck, because the U.S. is losing on a lot of fronts. Not only is it losing the military innovation, but it's also looking more dysfunctional domestically, which many people observe abroad. And that's something that's not really discussed in diplomatic circles publicly. But I've long suspected that many people are betting on China because they just look at the US. Many of these people have lived in the US and they'll just say, like, hell no, we don't want to be associated with this STD infected polity that's just a hub of degeneracy, loony ideas, and perpetual wars. And people notice that they look at the track record, which speaks for itself. Also, just like the countries that are in U.S. alliances or heavily in like its economic umbrella, they tend to be pretty dysfunctional. So the Chinese model offers an alternative, which has been actually quite successful for now.
Yeah. I do have questions about like their long-term financial or economic policy when it comes to like giving out low interest loans and forgiving debt down in South Africa. Like, I'm sure they're probably getting some of that back in like cobalt, lithium, and some of like the access to minerals down there. And also, like, all the time they're finding in the South China Sea different mineral deposits that have cobalt and magnesium and other metals. But how long can you do this form of debt forgiveness and also building infrastructure in other countries before your currency completely crashes? This is kind of something that I thought about when the whole trade war broke out. Is like, we're kind of testing the strength of BRICS because a lot of these countries like to run on dollar denominated debt. Okay, well, if you're denying them access to dollar denominated debt and dollar denominated markets, can you sustain yourself without that circulation of dollars? It seems like that whole process didn't really suss out because, once again, Trump couldn't bully China into a favorable deal for the US, but it still seems like, well, they were able to cut off the US from buying a bunch of soybeans from China, which is like a large export for them. They were managing to get it from other places. So it does kind of seem like China's like, all right, well, if you guys want to play hardball, then we could play hardball all day. But it seemed like the US ultimately cried uncle, because then they went back to them, gave a call to Xi and said, all right, we need those soybeans here again, or we need to export our soybeans to you.
There's definitely questions about China because, like pretty much every other nation, it's also having a declining birth rate. It's becoming an older
Yes.
society
Very
too,
rapidly.
and that also kind of means that it's not going to be participating in any other wars, because wars
Right.
are a young man's endeavor.
Right.
So that actually does have a positive, where it might not be that bellicose in a conventional sense. But yeah, the Africa investments, it's a mixed bag because it's Africa. And I think where China is going to be probably more focused is going to be Latin America, because those countries are dysfunctional, but they're not like the levels of Africa. And there's enough skilled people where China can get something in return. It also is obviously going to be more focused in Central Asia as well, and the Middle East. But I just think right now, with how dysfunctional the US is becoming, China just ends up winning out by default. But I also don't think China has aspirations of being a global hegemon either.
No.
I feel that's oversold by a lot of China hawks.
Yeah, I completely agree, because I think China looks at what the US has done and thinks, well, first of all, fuck that. But then also, like, their military isn't equipped for power projection. Like, they'll be able to protect Taiwan, but it's not like they're looking to really go anywhere out past the first or second island chain. But, plus some of their neighbors aren't that friendly to them. South Korea, India kind of teeter totters, but it seems like they're kind of going back towards the pro China side because Trump pissed off Modi. Australia isn't that friendly to China. You have AUKUS over there as well. So I don't think I completely agree with you that I think when people think that China is going to take over the world, even Tucker Carlson, who, like I said, I've a lot of love for him. I think they're kind of naive when they think that China's going to overtake the world. I think they may have trade relations with a lot of countries, but I don't think they're going to go militarily occupying any of these countries. I don't think that's their desire at all.
No, that's not even like in their historical DNA. Like, if
Right.
anything, China is more like repressive on like a domestic level or whatever when it comes to like assimilating like certain minorities and stuff like that. But like, China doesn't function. Like, this is the problem too.
Mhm.
Everybody's using like a Western form, like reference point for their geopolitical analysis. China is an Oriental type of power, so it has a different culture, different geography, and different priorities. Like, Asia is not very good, especially Southeast Asia, for really rapid scale warfare and that type of warfare like marked Europe, because a lot of Europe is just flat plains. It's just easy for armies to move across, and it's why it's been like a graveyard of many empires and just like a easy place to carry out war. Whereas a lot of Asia is just very rough, very humid, a lot of bad geography. I mean, look at Vietnam. China and the US couldn't subjugate it. So, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I think we covered just about everything I wanted to cover today. That Trump speech is already over. It's been over for like 10 minutes. So, I see a lot of people on Twitter saying this is probably one of his worst speeches yet. So, man, I don't think these midterms are going to be good, because people can say Candace Owens is costing the Republicans the midterms, but I think it's just the fact that Trump has failed to deliver on pretty much any of his promises. Like,
Yep, and
yeah,
overarching trends like the
yeah.
the party that with the president in office, they always end up losing seats one way or the other. So they've got headwinds all around.
Yeah, yeah. I think unless Trump really starts to come through on immigration or something like that, or the economy, I don't think anything. I don't think anything's good is coming down the pipe. I think it's going to be, they're going to get blown the fuck out, and I think it's largely because of Israel issue and because immigration. If you're not going to go forward with mass deportations and you're just going to kind of twiddle your thumbs about it, and when your main guys gets killed, you basically meme him out of existence and let the left tread all over his memory, then all right, well, I guess
Yep.
you're just going to lose the midterms.
Yeah, the economy is just totally in tatters as well. I talked to a lot
Mm.
of like young white males that just recently graduated college
Mhm.
with like STEM degrees and other high value degrees. It's just not in good shape, and people have really soured on Trump, who promised a golden age, and they're getting at best like a bronze age or copper. Honestly, at this point, yeah,
Yeah, well, you know what they say, fool's gold has its shine, I guess, which
yes, yeah, yeah.
that's
They're getting
probably of
fool's
no
gold.
yeah, that's probably of no comfort to them. So,
Yeah.
Jose, great as always, man. Go ahead, give your plugs where everybody could support you, find you, all that good stuff.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Jose Al Nino, and then I'm also on Substack at josealnino.org.
Mm. Cool, cool. Weren't you doing another show there briefly? I know you had Dave DeCamp on the one.
Yeah, Headline Geopolitics. Yes. So my normal gig is at Headline USA, where I'm a deputy editor, and I run their Headline Geopolitics side project too. I
Mm.
interview mostly foreign policy specialists there.
Cool. Well, definitely everybody go check out his stuff. I love your podcast, man. I love following you on Twitter because you always just I think you always have the right take on pretty much everything. So
Thank you.
always welcome here. And I guess until next time, everybody, I'll be live Sunday. I don't exactly know when, but until then, everybody have a good night. Take care, and I'll see you next time.